So we're going to get started on time. I like to do that in almost anything I pursue. So probably have maybe up to another 7, 8, 9 senators coming in to give their point of view on this. Trying to limit it to a couple minutes or so per senator. We'll stick around for maybe questions after everyone gets through. Briefly, Congressional Review Act. When I decide to get on anything here, it's going to be based mostly upon what I'm hearing back home. And I pledge to visit all 92 of our Indiana counties each year. And in the time that I've been in the Senate, especially coming from a place on Main Street where I had my own business for 37 years, and it was a small business, 15 employees for 17 of those years, through hard work. Lucky 3 of my 4 kids now work in the business. We're caught in the crossfire currently there with the companies I started having the same issues Main Street's having across the board. We're lucky we had a vaccine. I think we got it quicker than what we would have otherwise because we were entrepreneurial in the way we did it. I've been on record that unless you have a good reason not to, you should get the vaccine. But where I come from, when you then try to extend that to the point, especially looking at what we've traveled through over a year and a half, and to where hardly any transmission is occurring at the business level or what you do during the day, and then you have a brainstorm like this, you either get the vaccine or you get tested or you lose your job if you choose to do neither of the two. That is the heavy hand of government. That is overreach. And that is when my phone started ringing off the hook. When I would go back home each weekend, like I always do, I was getting called, texted. People would stop me and say, what is happening? And this is from not corporate America. This is from where we need to be paying attention. And remember, we were helping businesses up to 500 employees. We spent billions, trillions of dollars to get through this. And now, when everyone has found a way to navigate it because they've been responsible, businesses wanted to keep, from the beginning, their employees and their customers safe. You come up with this kind of ultimatum. It's got Main Street America scared. They're worried about, well, what does this mean on another issue? And anybody that thinks this is a good idea, imagine the next time it happens when you're on the wrong side of whatever the merits of the case would be. That's why, for me, it was easy to do. We quickly got all Republicans on board. Now it's bipartisan. I would say this, and want to hear from the other senators. I hope members in the House, Democrats in places, check with your constituents and make sure that they're not part of the 86% of Americans that say, when you put it in these terms, either get it or you lose your job, you're on the wrong side of the issue. Senator Barrasso.
When Joe Biden ran for president, hiding in his basement, he basically said he was the cure for COVID. He said, you know, elect me and everything's going to be fine. Well, he isn't. It isn't. He's been guilty of medical malpractice. I'm a doctor. I am pro-vaccine, but I'm anti-mandate. And that's because I believe the mandate is a massive overreach by the government and a massive mistake. And at this point, clearly the courts are agreeing with what we're trying to do. And I think actually the mandate has made it worse in terms of hardening people who don't want to be told what to do by the government. So today we are going to pass this Congressional Review Act to get rid of this mandate. You know, you wonder if the president's mantra on this seems to be vaccinate or terminate. And you wonder if he realizes there are 10 million open jobs in America right now. There are help wanted signs everywhere. Inflation is at a 30-year high. And yet this president is taking a sledgehammer to the workforce by saying, for all you people who have been coming to work every day on the front lines during the entire pandemic. Now you're going to get fired if you're not vaccinated. We're talking about police officers, nurses, talking about firefighters. You know, the inconsistencies of this administration are astounding. The president says to our border patrol, if you're not vaccinated, you're going to get fired. But at the same time, we have an overrun border with people coming into this country untested, unvaccinated. You know, if you want to earn a paycheck in America, you have to get vaccinated. But if you want to sit at home and collect a welfare check under Joe Biden's economy, then it doesn't matter to him whether you're vaccinated or not. So it's no surprise to any of us who are up here that Joe Biden is staring right now at a 30-year record high number for inflation and a record low number when it comes to his own presidential approval.
Senator Marshall.
Economic shutdown. That's what's going to happen if this federal vaccine mandate enforced by OSHA goes forward. There will be an economic shutdown. There'll be brownouts. Inflation's going to rise, supply chain disruption, and of course a threat to national security. I think it's very evident what happens if this federal vaccine mandate goes forward. Those people that work the line, the electric lines to keep us in electricity, the people that make sure we have heat for our homes, as those people lose their jobs, it's going to create economic shutdowns, brownouts, inflation, and supply chain disruption. But I have to back up just a minute and go off script for a second. I want to emphasize how important the vaccine is, and especially booster shots. With Omicron variant, without the booster shot, you're probably not going to be protected much at all. New studies coming out supporting that the booster shots work against Omicron. That's incredible news. And really encourage senior citizens, people that are at risk, people with diabetes, pre-diabetes, people that are a little overweight. All those folks need to talk to their doctor about the booster, but the mandate is going to backfire. The people that thus far have not received the vaccine are not going to do it until this White House acknowledges natural immunity. The good news is 92% of Americans, according to the CDC website, have some level of immunity to this virus right now. Between natural immunity, which we think will protect you very well, and the vaccinations, we're on our way to a victory here. But the president's plan will create another crisis. It'll create an economic shutdown. Thank you.
Senator Sullivan.
I want to thank Senator Braun for his leadership on this. Look, the key issue that I think is really important to emphasize is when you look at how we got through the pandemic last year in 2020 in a bipartisan way, Democrats, Republicans, one of the core principles of all the relief legislation that we put forward was this: businesses, small businesses, airlines, big businesses, defense contractors, you're going to get federal relief if you keep your employees, if you keep them. The whole idea last year in a bipartisan way was that you get relief and let's get through the pandemic by keeping employers and employees together. That was the law. This president has taken a sledgehammer to that principle. And it's remarkable, because what he is now saying is, if you don't listen to me, I'm going to require employers to fire your employees. That is a 180-degree turn from where we all were as a Congress in the previous administration. And it's the wrong principle on so many fronts, particularly because so many people at risk of being fired right now: police, firemen, oil and gas workers, defense contractors, were the ones we were begging to stay on the job when there was no vaccine to keep our economy moving. Now, we all want to get through this pandemic, put this in the rearview mirror, but it needs to be based on the Constitution, the law, and as we are seeing right now, every court that looks at these, the federal contractor mandate, the OSHA mandate, is saying it's neither constitutional or legal. And it's not going to be good for the economy. And I think tomorrow's CRA vote, or today's CRA vote, you're going to see a bipartisan group of U.S. senators agree with the courts and say this is not the right principle, and it's not legal, and it's not constitutional.
Senator Capito.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here with my colleagues, and I would particularly like to thank Senator Braun for bringing this congressional act forward so that we can express what we hear every day from our constituents. I'd like to flash back to a year ago. A year ago, in response to an answer to a question, President Biden, and I believe he was President-elect Biden at the time, when asked about a mandate for the COVID-19 vaccine, said, "No, I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand it to be mandatory," he said. And we've seen through the year that he has gone back on his word. I had a telephone town hall last night. The anxiety of people in my state of West Virginia, and I'm sure it's shared with all of our states, over this vaccine mandate is real. It's daunting to families as they're facing higher bills for their gas and their heating. They are very concerned about what this would do to their long-term ability to get a job, keep a job. And I think they realize that this is an invasion into their own abilities to make decisions about themselves in their health care. I'm very pleased that Senator Marshall brought forward how much he passionately believes in the vaccine and the boosters, and I share that. And many of us, if not all of us, every time we have the opportunity, are encouraging folks in our state for their own protection. But that encouraging and requiring are two different things. So if you look at my state, 40% of my state's workforce stands to lose their job under this mandate. Those are manufacturing jobs, those are public service jobs, those are smaller businesses jobs. It's all across the spectrum. And it will be a killer to our economy. But it's bigger than that. It's bigger than killing the economy. It's killing the American spirit of being able to make decisions about yourself, to be respected for that, and to find the best way to find the healthiest reaction to this pandemic. So I would also like to thank Senator Sullivan, as I think he makes an excellent point. We were asking people to stay on the job through thick and thin over the last year, and now we're questioning whether they should stay. And the last anecdotal thing I would say is if you look at what some of the federal agencies are doing, they're pushing their vaccine mandates back further and further back. Why is that? Because they're in danger of losing 20 or 30% of their workforce in something such as Border Patrol, TSA, other things that protect us to have a safe environment. So I'm very, very pleased to be joining the effort to try to stop this federal overreach, and I think President Biden should listen to his own words of a year ago. A mandate is not necessary, it's not something he would put into effect, and it's something he does not believe in. Thank you.
Senator Langford.
Mr. Braun, thank you for hosting that. It's the United States of America. The United States of America, we make decisions for our own lives. Months and months ago, I chose to be able to take the vaccine. Was grateful to be able to do that, grateful to be able to have the opportunity, grateful for the innovation and the science that went into actually developing the vaccine, but that was my choice. There are millions of other people across the country that have determined they don't want to take the vaccine. And in the United States, where right now 92% of the adult population, 92%, either has natural immunity based on having COVID and recovered or has the vaccine, we're at a very high rate of immunity right now across the country. And for the President of the United States to step up like he is the country's dad rather than the country's president, to be able to step up and to say, I don't care how long you work there, how important you are to the company, what your task, what your role is, what you did during the pandemic when there was no vaccine, how you stood and served people in a vulnerable moment. I don't care about any of that. If you don't follow my orders, you're fired. Number one, in the United States of America, that's not the role of the President of the United States. The President of the United States cannot reach into every company and pick and choose who he wants hired and fired. And when I talk to employers in my state in Oklahoma, The most difficult issue they're facing right now is the potential that they're going to have huge fines in their company if they don't fire critical workforce that's in their company. So they can either choose for their company to suffer and not be able to fulfill contracts and responsibilities that they have, not be able to fulfill orders that are already coming in because the president's demanding that these individuals are fired, when these individuals worked throughout the pandemic. Many of them have already had COVID and recovered and have natural immunity now, but because it's not the president's preference, they are, as an employer, struggling with whether they're going to face OSHA fines or to be able to fulfill what their company normally does, to be able to even stay open to fulfill orders. This is what real life looks like across Oklahoma. Individuals right now are walking into Christmas thinking about in January they're about to get fired. That's the present that the President of the United States is giving to American families all over my state. Consider over Christmas what you're going to do, because in January I may work to get you fired. That's not who we are as a country. Let me just give you 3 quick stories. One of them that was an individual, actually this particular company has quite a few folks that are disabled individuals that work in their company. The company has more than 100 employees, and they're struggling with the fact that many of these individuals have medical exemptions. Many of these things are very nebulous in the OSHA rules that are actually coming out, and the company is struggling with literally laying off individuals that are already disabled that for medical reasons are being told no. One of my constituents is facing termination for not being vaccinated, works for a large company. In this particular company, he has already been told that he's going to have to sign 2 forms in the coming days. Now, he has been told by his doctor that he's at high risk of blood clots. And so he's one of those individuals that's concerned about getting the vaccine. But he's being forced to sign 2 forms. One of those, the first form is to agree to be vaccinated or lose his job. The second form is agree that if he has a negative reaction to the vaccine, he won't sue the company. That's not right. Third quick story. This is somebody that works on a poultry farm in Oklahoma. Has already been fired because this mandate's been in place for a while. Has now lost his home and is living back with his parents again as an adult. That's the gift that President Biden is giving to families in my state. Lose your job, lose your house, doesn't care, just do what I tell you to do or be on your own.
Senator Thinden.
Well, thanks, Mike, and thanks for your leadership on this issue. And I think sometimes issues come into clear view that really illustrate the choice between big government and individual freedom. And this issue probably does that better than anything. Now, when Democrats gain power, which they have now in Washington, D.C., they have the whole of government, they have the House, the Senate, and the White House. What typically happens is they want to grow and expand government, the reach of government into people's lives. We've seen that. It's evidenced in the reckless tax and spending spree bill that they're talking about right now. It's evidenced in their attempt to take over elections in this country from states. It is this inertia that Democrats have when they gain power to try and grow and expand government. And in this particular case, they really have gone too far. And I say that as somebody who, like some of my colleagues, is pro-vaccine. I'm vaccinated. I encourage people to get vaccinated. But I don't believe that that's something the federal government can mandate for businesses around this country. And we're going to have an opportunity on the floor of the United States to overturn this mandate and to express our support for American businesses and American workers. Because in the end, you've heard this, and I've heard it, I've seen it in my state. I've talked to constituents who are dealing with this on a daily basis. They are extremely concerned about the impact this will have on an already stretched and strapped workforce around this country. This is not something that the federal government should be interfering with when it comes to the choices made by the American people. Now, the courts have already ruled and continue to rule. They continue to overturn this mandate, but that has not deterred or stopped the Democrats from, proceeding headlong to try and impose this onerous, heavy-handed mandate on businesses and workers across this country. So every Democrat's going to get a chance to go on the record when we have this vote, and we will have Republicans and Democrats in support of the fundamental choice that is going to be before us and frankly before the American people, and that is whether you want more, bigger, intrusive, heavy-handed government in your lives, or whether you want to preserve what has distinguished and differentiated and made this country different and unique and special since its inception, and that is our belief in individual freedom.
Senator Daines.
Every so often, Washington, D.C. does something that lights up the phone lines. This is one of these moments. As I travel around Montana, this issue is what I hear about. It's a top-of-mind issue for Montanans. They can't believe what this administration is doing with this mandate. And as many of my colleagues have stated, this is not about being anti-vaccine. I was part of the Pfizer trial. I'm pro-science, pro-vaccine, but I'm anti-mandate. The fear in the voices of Montanans that I'm hearing when they call me and talk about their situation, it's the lumberyard in Bozeman that fears a 10 to 20% reduction in workforce, loss of workers they'd have to fire because of this mandate. We already have supply chain disruptions and rising housing costs. It's the lodge in Whitefish, Montana, that sees a 10 to 30% potential loss in their workforce when they can't fill many of the jobs today already. And they fear coming into the holiday season, starting to think about who are they going to have to let go, who will leave because of this mandate. It's a sheriff of Montana who called me a couple weeks ago. He said, my wife's a nurse, and we are scared of what's going to happen to the nurses at one of our leading hospitals when we already don't have enough healthcare workers in the front lines battling the challenge we face in Montana. There's fear in the voices of Montanans when they're looking at this incredible overreach by this administration. I'm thankful for Senator Braun's leadership. You're going to see a united Republican front in opposing this mandate and restoring the choice back to the people. And we have businesses that have just slightly over 100 employees are literally contemplating letting some workers go to get to 99 because somehow if you have 99 workers, you're safe. But if you have 100, you're not. It makes no sense. And this is why we must firmly oppose this and plead with the Biden administration to reverse course and give that to the American people as a present this Christmas.
Senator Hogan.
In our system of government, we have the three branches, checks and balances. That's the whole idea: legislative, judicial, and, of course, the executive. And the idea is when one of the branches, gets too far out there, exceeds their authority, violates the people's rights, then it's incumbent on the other two branches to step up. And that's exactly what's happening. You've seen the Biden administration. Now, this is a clear overreach with this vaccine mandate. There's no question about it. And not only are they imposing the vaccine mandate, they're actually trying to force businesses to enforce it. Clear overreach by the executive. And so the other two branches are doing just what we are supposed to do under the Constitution, and that is to check that overreach, to protect the rights of the people. That's how our system works. That's how our Constitution works. And so you're seeing the process go through the courts, and you're seeing that through the Congressional Review Act, Congress is stepping up and acting. And thanks to Senator Braun and others, all Republicans and some Democrats, we're going to pass this Congressional Review Act on a bipartisan basis in the Senate, sending a very clear message that this is an overreach by the Biden administration, and we need to stop it. And I think in the House, there's a very good chance that they will get enough people to sign on to this CRA to actually force a vote. Now, we understand that when that goes to the administration, the president may well veto it, but we've sent a very clear bipartisan message on behalf of the people that this mandate needs to be stopped. And then working with the courts, we will get it done. I'm confident we will get it done. You've already seen it enjoined around the country. And so I think that means between the legislative branch, the judicial branch, we're going to get this overturned and stopped on behalf of the American people. Senator Daines is right on. We're hearing more about this issue than any other single issue when we go home to our respective states. And you can go across the country. Across the country, this is the number one thing that people bring up, and they're very upset about it. And so we're well on our way. It has been enjoined, and I believe that we are going to get it overturned. And the final point I'll make is the same point that I think every single one of us will make, is that, look, we're supportive of getting vaccinated. I've had all of the vaccinations, including the booster. That's not what this is about. This is about protecting Americans' rights, and in this case, having the right to make their own decision in consultation with their health care provider.
Senator Blackburn.
I had the opportunity to do a Zoom call with about 50 Tennessee healthcare workers last week. And they brought up the fact that their concern was not only many of them, but also their coworkers were going to be fired because of this vaccine mandate. They are not anti-vax. They are pro-vax, but they are anti-mandate. This is not the federal government's place. And whether it is the good work that Senator Lee has done last week, Senator Marshall looking at funding, the good work of Senator Braun on the CRA, my legislation, which would keep essential workers working, the Keeping Our COVID-19 Heroes Employed Act. What we are learning is very simply this. The American people oppose the mandate. The American people want to see this mandate pulled back and removed. And the American people want to have their freedom of choice in how they handle their health care. I talked with a lady who is recovering from cancer. Her doctor said, do not get this vaccine. She can't take the flu shot right now. But she is distraught because she's going to lose her job and her health insurance because she is not able to take this vaccine. So these are the real-life implications of what is happening all across this country. This action we're taking today is basically a stop the firing action. There are 1.4 million Tennesseans that would lose their job. 4 out of 10 manufacturing employees in our plants would lose their job. And employers would be paying about $75 million out of their profit line to enforce a mandate that their employees do not want. So I applaud Senator Braun and am pleased to support his good work.
Senator Lee.
My name is Mike, and I'm pro-vaccine, but I'm anti-mandate because I'm pro-worker. I also happen to be very strongly anti-legislation by executive order. We've got 45 million American jobs that are at stake. 45 million. This is exactly the kind of moment, the very kind of issue that the Congressional Review Act was designed to address. We, of course, wanted to make sure that where there are instances of presidential overreach, Congress can have a chance to step in and undo it. We've got an opportunity to do that today, and we have every expectation that it's going to pass the Senate. After it passes the Senate, it's going to go to the House. It's going to be really hard after the Senate passes this resolution for the House to not pass it. I mean, first of all, there's no choice. They have no option other than to take it up. It will receive a vote, and when it receives a vote, members of the House are going to have to make the decision on how they will face their constituents. You know, some 700,000 constituents per member on the other side of the Capitol, and tell them, I'm not concerned about your job. This is not some hypothetical exercise for their constituents. And in a lot of our states, it involves a lot of people. We're talking about 500,000 jobs at stake in Utah. In California, by the way, there are 5 million. In Arizona, 1.2 million. About 300,000 in West Virginia. But overall, we're talking about tens of millions, probably about 45 million jobs across the United States that could be affected by this, that are at stake, that are on the chopping block directly as a result of this. This isn't right. It's simply an immoral proposition. Setting aside for a moment all the constitutional issues, which are many and are serious and are going to prevail at the end of the day because the Supreme Court of the United States will not let this stand. Not any more than they've let stand other egregious exercises of presidential power, of which this one is a doozy. I don't think in our lifetimes we've seen a single executive action that even compares to this one in terms of its breathtaking excess. And make no mistake, this act, in all of the harm that it inflicts, is going to leave a lasting impact. There's no chance that presidential and executive power won't be significantly clipped after this. There's no chance that in the years to come, this won't propel us into a direction that we've needed to take for a long time, frankly, because we've over-empowered the executive branch over many decades. And I'm talking about Republicans and Democrats alike enacting laws that give excessive power to the presidency. Look, an action like this is unambiguously a policy decision, one imposing affirmative legal obligations on the American people that didn't exist prior to the action. That's a policy decision. That is legislative in nature. Consequently, under Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution, it's supposed to originate in Congress. Bicameral passage followed by presentment to the President is the constitutional formula. We don't have any of that here. So what we're going to see in years to come is an expansion of things like the Congressional Review Act, passage of other proposals that will set the default proposition, not that we have to undo it, subject to presidential veto, but that he can't act unless Congress affirmatively enacts it and then presents it to him for final approval. This is a moment where, separate and apart from all those constitutional issues, which are many and which are grave, the American people are counting on us. Sure, there's litigation going on. There have been orders that have been issued that have offered temporary patchwork quilt relief to some of the people involved in that litigation. But only Congress is in a position now to stop it permanently, to stop it immediately, to save their jobs in time for the holidays. This is our moment. We intend to do our part. Thank you.
Well, I enthusiastically support Senator Braun's bipartisan Congressional Review Act legislation, and I say bipartisan because I expect this to pass with bipartisan support this evening. The first objection I have to this mandate is it's unconstitutional for reasons that Senator Lee and others have alluded to. There's nothing in the Constitution that empowers the President to order, particularly private employers, to do anything. Obviously, under the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution, it says all powers not expressly delegated to the federal government are reserved to the people in the states. And there is no exception for vaccine mandates. I, too, am pro-vax. I encourage everybody to get vaccinated. I have been and will continue to encourage my constituents and friends and family to do so. This is not about whether people should choose to get vaccinated or not. I think they should, but that's their choice, not mine and not President Biden's. Secondly, I think this is overbroad. It makes no exception for whether or not you have naturally occurring antibodies as a result of a previous exposure to COVID-19. And people may figure out in the management of their own risk and in their own health that that is sufficient for them to protect themselves along with other measures. And then third, it's the response that we are getting across the country where people are literally quitting their jobs because they're not going to comply with this mandate. And this is a time of unprecedented disruptions of supply chains, and where it's hard to get people to come back to work because of the various financial incentives we've given people not to work over time, but now people's continued concerns about this mandate. So we need to quit looking at this virus through a soda straw. We need to look at the entire context, the physics, the actions and reactions that take place on a complex topic like this. And I'll proudly vote, along with Senator Braun and all of my Republican colleagues and a number of Democratic colleagues, to get rid of this unconstitutional, overbroad, unnecessary mandate.
Senator Scott.
I won't repeat what my friends and colleagues have said up here already, but I do want to focus on the importance of the mandate's impact on public safety. Having grown up in South Carolina and North Charleston, I see cities throughout South Carolina and around the country, frankly, New York City being perhaps the poster child of bad decisions, especially as it relates to this mandate. The oppressive decision that the mayor has made and the negative impact that it will have on public safety is without question one of the most alarming aspects of this mandate, and one of the reasons why I look forward to the passage of this CRA. But importantly, think about the firefighters who are no longer working on their jobs. Think about the EMS drivers, the EMTs, who are no longer able to save lives. And you think about the law enforcement officers, the police officers in my hometown and throughout this nation who are no longer on the job. The negative impact on public safety in a year where violent crime is hitting highs. It's a devastating impact in places like the one that I grew up in, where the last thing you want is fewer officers patrolling the streets in the neighborhoods. The thing you want most is the presence of law enforcement in those neighborhoods. And we see that not being possible as city after city across this nation sees a loss of more and more officers, sees a loss of more and more firefighters, sees a loss of more and more EMTs because of this mandate. The negative impact will be felt in the loss of lives because of the lack of individuals responding to emergencies in communities all across this country, not responding because the government gets in the way.
Senator Lumpus.
Fatally flawed. Fatally flawed. That's what one Circuit Court of Appeals called this. You don't have to be a Circuit Court of Appeals judge in this country to know it's fatally flawed. You can be a cowboy in Wyoming. You can be a construction worker in Indiana. You can be a constitutional scholar. It's fatally flawed. You don't have to be a Republican to know it's fatally flawed. You can be an independent, a Democrat, a non-voter, a teacher, a firefighter. You know it's fatally flawed. You can be a doctor who has advised certain of his or her patients not to get the vaccine to know it's fatally flawed. That's why we're voting on this bill tonight. That's why I'm proud of Senator Braun for bringing this up. That's why the Wyoming legislature called a special session to address this issue. It's because it's fatally flawed. I hope the executive branch will reverse course. They know it's fatally flawed. And if they don't, we're happy to tell them, the people, the states, the Congress, the courts, Mr. President, this mandate is fatally flawed.
So you can see by the number of senators that showed up where the train of thought is. And there's a vote being held open that we've got to get to. take a couple questions, and then we'll have to go down to the floor. Go ahead.
I want to touch on something that Senator McCain said,
Yeah.
that this bill will be brought up in the House. It has to be brought up on the petition to discharge it. Why would the 5 Democrats that need to step up, why would they force this issue in the House?
Why would they not? Why wouldn't they? Every one of them, every last one of them, will face a really large number of people in their states whose jobs will be on the line in one way or another. And even those whose jobs are not on the chopping block will be affected by the downstream effects of people losing their jobs en masse. Aside from everything else, the fact that we're approaching the holiday season, nobody wants to face Christmas with the prospect of losing their job hanging over their head. It adds a degree of emotion to this. But more than that, more than the time of year, the closer this gets to being reality, the more people are realizing that it's just fundamentally unfair. A recent Axios poll showed that 14% of Americans, only 14%, agree with President Biden that it's a good idea to fire someone because they don't want to get the jab. That's why they should join it. And I really do genuinely wonder why anyone would not vote for it. This is not popular. It wasn't popular from the outset, but it has gotten steadily less popular as time has gone by. There's no reason why they have to be wedded to it. I get it. If they're Democrats, maybe they want to support their president. It's not an inexorable command. I've certainly opposed presidential actions during Republican administration. I get that. But it doesn't mean that you sign away your oath to the Constitution. It certainly doesn't mean you have to betray common sense. And it definitely doesn't mean that you have to betray fundamental fairness and your obligation to your own constituents.
Thank you. One more question. Go ahead.
Quick question. Senator Braun and Senator Lee, there are multiple vaccine mandates for schools, in your own home states. Do you think that these mandates are at all anything like that, or do you think that, what makes these mandates different from mandates that have been in the past?
So, in my opinion, this is different because it's coming from the highest level of authority. It's a federal mandate. Most other vaccine mandates, and I think they've all originated at the state level. And this is done also in the context of probably a hotter political, environment too, to where 92% have either been vaccinated or gotten immunity through natural infection. Look at it this way, because I look at things practically, and we don't do that very often here. Is the marginal benefit of one additional vaccination worth or equivalent to the marginal disadvantage of what you heard from Senator Daines, Senator Lankford, in somebody having to give up a job for, regardless of the reason they get into that fork in the road, there's no equivalency there. And I think that is where you got to realize that you've made your point, you're digging the hole deeper on the part of the administration, and you're not looking at what this is going to do to Main Street America. Thank you so much for coming, and we got to get down to the vote.
You take the good ones that come to